The wind didn't howl that night so much as whisper through its teeth, a thin, cruel sound that threaded down the empty street and slipped beneath the girl's scarf. Frost powdered the curb like crushed glass. When she saw the shape by the chain-link fence, just a shadow at first, she almost kept walking, because the cold had already found the bones in her hands, and she'd promised her mother not to stop for anything. But then the shadow lifted its head. Two eyes, not the blue of ice but the brown of river mud, watched her without blinking. The dog's ribs moved like somebody counting slowly under a blanket. Steam rose from its breath. On the fence, a loop of twine swung and knocked against metal, tap, 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 the sound of something left behind. In that moment, the girl's breath came in small, urgent bursts she couldn't control. She thought of her own winter mornings before school, when she pressed her palms to the heater vent and felt the radiator's tired heartbeat through the metal grill. She knelt. The dog flinched back, dragging on the twine as if it could somehow tow the past away. "Hey," she said, as though the word were a cup of tea you could hand to a stranger through the air. The dog didn't come, but it didn't run either, and the cold was a witness to both of them. The storm's tail had passed that afternoon, but winter kept its grip. Snow lived where the plows had gathered it, in hard banks shoved against corners and steps. The girl, Lina, had a way of slowing down when the world grew sharp. She listened the way people do when they are learning a new language. That was why she noticed the dog at all. She noticed the twine, the small patch of fur rubbed raw at the neck, the makeshift bed of flattened cardboard darkened with old wet. She noticed the silence in the dog, which wasn't calm but a kind of patience that hurt to look at. Her backpack strap creaked on her shoulder. She remembered the rule, come straight home, and the way her mother's mouth went thin at the corners when money talk started. Behind the fence a narrow yard held a sled collapsed on its side and a plastic shovel with a bite taken out of its lip. Somewhere a bus hissed. "You're freezing," Lina said, though it was the most foolish sentence in the world, because everything was freezing. She slid her mitten off and held out her bare hand like a candle that had chopped itself down to a stub. The dog lifted its nose and tasted the air. The wind pushed a strand of Lina's hair into her mouth. It tasted like wet wool and metal. She spit it out and stayed where she was, breath fogging between them, and thought, with that clarity children sometimes get when they don't know they're not allowed to be brave, that maybe this was the only thing she had to do today. She learned later that you shouldn't rush a dog that has been abandoned, that there is a choreography of gentleness you have to follow, a dance that teaches both of you how not to be afraid. But in that first moment she acted on instinct. She slipped the strap of her backpack over her head and set it in the snow. She told the dog a story, nonsense really, about the hot chocolate she'd left half, finished on the kitchen table, and how her mother always forgot where she hid the marshmallows. The twine flicked against the fence again. The dog's ears moved, one twitch, then two, its tail, which she hadn't seen at first because it was tucked so tight beneath its body, uncurled a fraction, like the end of a ribbon finding courage. Lina slowed her breathing. She willed the shiver from her hand. When her palm touched the dog's fur, it was like touching a coat someone had left on the porch overnight, crisp, cold, limp, holding onto the shape of something that had bravely kept another warm. The dog didn't snap. It didn't whine. It leaned the smallest part of its weight into her fingers, as if testing the math of trust. Cars passed, and their tires made that winter noise, a hush with grit in it. Lina looked at the twine, then at the knot around a bent section of the fence. She tugged the knot gently, the way you'd pull at a bad decision to see if it would let go. It tightened in reply. She grimaced. "Okay," she said. "No pulling. Not today." She tried to slide her fingers under the twine around the dog's neck and felt the heat there, trapped beneath the cold. Her fingertips came away damp. She wished she knew the right words. You can improvise a lullaby, she thought. You can improvise a promise. "Come on," she whispered, shifting her weight slowly, until she was sitting cross-legged in the snow, the way you sit when you mean to be a good listener. The dog lowered its head. And when it finally took that single step closer, the twine slackening a breath's worth, Lina felt the bruise of the day lift off her chest, because some moments are small and still contain everything a life can hold. On the third step behind the grocery store, Lina pressed the heel of her hand to the snow and watched it hold the shape of her palm before collapsing. The light over the rear door shed a pie slice of yellow into the alley, making the ice glitter like a lie. She had cut through here the way she always did because it saved 6 minutes and her legs had started to ache a block ago. But the dog had not been here before, and that made the alley new in a way she didn't like. Even newness has a temperature. This kind came with a sting. The dog was bigger than something you carry and smaller than something that has ever been allowed to feel safe. German Shepherd, she guessed, though the winter had given him a rougher outline. His coat was a book that had been left outside too long. Pages warped, spine broken, still stubbornly a book. The twine around his neck looked more suited to tying up boxes than lives. If anyone had left food, wind had erased it. There was only a black plastic bowl flipped upside down in the snow, a tinny circle of sky cupped in it. When Lina spoke, she pitched her voice halfway between how she talked to the neighbor's baby and the way she talked to the old elevator when it groaned and failed to notice the 4th floor again. The words were nothing, a rough little raft she pushed toward him. He did not climb aboard, but he watched the raft and that mattered. Her mother would be home soon, and the time between now and then felt like a shallow pocket that couldn't hold everything Lina wanted to put in it. She was good at fitting too much into small places. She could make homework and laundry and dinner into one long thin thread and balance on it till bedtime. But this was a different kind of fit. She could almost feel the shape of Trouble the landlord with his flat voice, the note about pets pinned to the building's corkboard, the way her mother's shoulders would rise like held breath. Still, the dog shivered and the night took notes of it. She shrugged off her backpack, opened the front pocket, and found the half-broken granola bar she'd forgotten after last Saturday's tutoring session. "I know," she said, as much to herself as to him. "This is not an approved treat." She broke off a piece small as a thumbnail and flicked it toward him. The sound of it landing on the cardboard was the saddest click she had ever heard. He didn't move. He stared untrusting, a sentinel at the gate of his own hunger. The snow in his whiskers was delicate and mean at once. She ate the other half of the granola herself. She didn't plan it. Her mouth just moved. Because something about eating before a scared animal felt like saying, "I'm still alive, and you can be too." The taste of stale oats stuck to her teeth. "Okay," she breathed, adjusting the world around them. She loosened the twine from the fence, just enough to give him a radius that included one step toward her, and sat. Minutes passed differently when you are trying to be a creature that terrifies nothing. She held still. The alley learned the shape of their stillness and stopped looking so eager to snap. When he finally crept forward, his paw sank into a patch of slush, and he startled at his own splash, jerking back so hard the twine cut a darker line in the fur at his neck. "Hey," Lina murmured, the word stretching long and soft. She put the rest of the granola only an inch from her boot and waited. He put his nose near her laces, the cracked leather with its dirty salt line, and sniffed. She knew he could smell her classroom's chalk dust, and the cumin from last night's chickpeas, and the laundry soap that always made the apartment smell like rain even when it didn't. When his tongue touched the leather, tasting the world, something in her chest unclenched. She didn't reach for him. She simply was there, near enough that if he chose it, the distance could be closed. The twine had been knotted by hands that knew how to end things. The knot sat where it could bite deeper if anyone pulled too fast. Lina slid the dull corner of her school ID beneath it and eased. The way you loosen a shoelace when you're not ready to let go of the shoe. When it loosened a fraction, she thought, ridiculously, of a door she once found in a thrift store, painted shut by some past plan, and how good it had felt to cut the paint with the tip of a knife, to free the seam so it could be a seam again. The dog exhaled heavily, as if he had been the one holding his breath. "North," she said then, the word arriving with the certainty of a compass. She hadn't meant to name him. Names cost things. They came with obligations. But there it was, the syllable between them, a direction you choose in order to be brave. She expected resistance when she stood. He wobbled, and she felt the complex math of his hope and dread flicker through the twine between them. The alley's ice scolded beneath her boots. She shortened the twine, not to trap him, just to translate the idea together. The wind changed and carried the smell of someone's dinner. Onion browning in butter, heat in a pan, and it made her realize how cold he must be, not as a concept, but as a temperature that pooled in bones. "Come on," she whispered, and he followed. They walked like thieves who had no idea what they had stolen or whom they had stolen it from. Back streets first, where snow softened the noise of their trespass. North's feet found the asphalt's memory under the powder and chose it. Lina skirted the streetlights, because light is also a kind of authority. Twice he stopped and looked behind them, and twice she learned that patience is a rope you hold very loosely so it will not break in your hand. Her building loomed up, brick shoulders shrugging against the sky. The entry's glass door wore a scratch from years of keys missing perfectly. Lina slipped inside and stood with North in the hall where the radiator hissed a tired song. He leaned into her leg, not all the way, no, but enough to let her feel how much a creature weighs when it is half made of fear and half of relief. Her mother's face, when Lina opened the apartment door, contained three expressions at once: a fear that her child had been followed, fury that her child had not come straight home, and love-die that her child had come home all the same. The fourth expression, "What in God's good world is that?" arrived a beat later when North trotted in as if he had been paying rent here for years. He paused, sniffed the air in the shape of a question mark, and sneezed. Snow shook from his coat and spattered the rug like confetti thrown at a wedding the apartment had not been invited to. "What?" her mother said, pronouncing it not as curiosity but as a limit. "He was tied up," Lina replied, "behind the store, with Twine," as if Twine were a specific sin her mother would recognize. "No," her mother said, softer than a shout could ever be. "We cannot. The landlord. Just the night." She knelt, hearing how this made her sound like someone who had already calculated the price. "He'll be dead out there. Please." Her mother stared at the dog the way you look at a clock when you are deciding whether you can steal 5 minutes you know you can't afford. The heater clanged. Somewhere in the building a child practiced the same piano scale 14 times badly and then gave up. North drank water with frantic discipline. Pausing between gulps to check the room had not changed. When he finished, he rested his chin on the lip of the empty bowl, as if he meant to apologize for the noise of his thirst. "You'll call the shelter in the morning," her mother said, as if speaking to the wall where the rules lived, not to Lina. "He sleeps in the kitchen. And don't get attached." Lina nodded, because nodding is sometimes a tool you use to keep time moving forward. North lay down on the kitchen floor and curled himself like a word with no vowel in it. When the light hit his ribs at a particular angle, Lina could count days. She put a towel down, old, thin, bleached like sun, had left its fingerprints on it, and he turned his head to rest it on fabric. It's funny, she thought, how the body knows a small softness when it finds it, how it recognizes a mercy without having to translate it. She did not sleep long. Some nights let you pass through them like water. This one kept throwing pebbles at the window of her rest. She woke to North whimpering under his breath, a sound that had no teeth in it, only a choice between waking and not. She slid out of bed, padded to the kitchen, and sat beside him on the floor. He did not wake. His paws twitched, running without movement. She placed her hand on his flank, and the heat of him made her think of summer, of a different life where heat was something you opened a window to escape. His breath slowed. She watched the way sleep made him lighter, or maybe it made her stronger. Because the weight of worry did not sink her as it had before. She stayed until dawn turned the window into a pale coin, and the building began its morning music of pipes and footsteps. Morning put a hard edge on everything. The shelter's phone rang and rang before settling into recorded politeness that sounded like defeat arranged neatly on a shelf. "Overcapacity," the voice said. "Leave a message." Lina left 3, each one shorter than the last, as if shortening could make them sharper. better able to pierce whatever wall the world had put between this dog and help. Her mother's mouth set into lines that were familiar, the ones she wore when adding up bills. "We will find his family," she said, meaning both hope and the truth that sometimes families do the leaving. They made rounds. A vet who worked out of a storefront that smelled like rubbing alcohol and oatmeal shampoo. A bulletin board in a cafe papered with smiling cats who didn't look like they had ever been cold. A boy on the 3rd floor who said he'd seen a man with a dog like that. Maybe, but the dog then had a red collar, not Twine, a woman in a green coat who said she would pray and meant it. The vet, a woman whose hair was pulled into a knot as practical as the one at North's neck had been cruel, examined him with the patient insistence of someone who believed in the accumulation of small kindnesses. "Underweight," she said, "but strong in the eyes." She touched the skin beneath the Twine mark, frowning at what the body remembered. She weighed him, and the number on the scale felt like it belonged to a ghost. "He's young," she added. "Old enough to have been failed. Young enough to learn that not everyone will." Lina swallowed. Her mother watched the vet with the cautious gratitude of someone who had been told too many times that what they wanted could not be afforded. When the vet waived half the fee and sent them home with a bag of food and instructions written in neat letters, Lina tucked the paper into her notebook as if it were a letter from the future. North learned the apartment in layers. The first day he avoided thresholds as if doorways were tricks. The second he followed Lina from room to room like sound follows a bell. He learned where the kitchen sun pooled at noon and lay there so still that Lina had to check he was breathing. He startled at doors slammed in the hallway and then watched Lina not startle and then, the next time, didn't startle quite so much himself. He barked once a surprised, hoarse question when the kettle shrieked. That night he stood staring at the window for so long that Lina stood with him, seeing what could be seen. Their own reflections made strange by darkness, the outline of a neighbor watering a plant, a slice of street where snow wore tire tracks like scars. When he leaned against her hip, it felt like the kind of thank you that doesn't ask for attention. Naming a thing is dangerous because it becomes more itself. After 2 days of calling him, "Hey there," and "boy," and "sir," the word North slipped out again when he wove his long body through the narrow space between chair and table without touching either, as deft as Weather's hand. It stuck the way names stick when the world agrees. Her mother tried not to say it. But names teach yourself to yourself, and one evening, when North decided to rest his head on her mother's foot while she graded papers at the table, her mother murmured, "North, you're heavy," and the word didn't burn her mouth as she feared. North closed his eyes. The neighbors were less generous. Mr. Singh from 2B knocked on their door with the careful posture of a man who preferred order to sympathy. He had a complaint already folded in his pocket. You could see it in the triangle his fingers made. "No pets," he said. But his voice softened when North came to sniff at his trouser cuff and blinked up at him as if to say, "I am also a neighbor." "For now," he conceded, after Lina's mother explained the calls and the elusive shelter. "For now is sometimes the best we can do." The city's second storm didn't announce itself like the first. It slipped in the way a secret does, casual and then everywhere. Ice draped the power lines with jewelry they didn't want. Snow came in wafers that stacked into silence. School closed the way an eye closes. Lina and North took a short walk that turned into a longer one because the world needed walking. The air tightened around them until it had a texture. North put his nose into the wind and read it like a letter. He trotted, then loped, then paused to stare at a plastic bag snagged on a hedge, lifting and falling like a bird with broken thinking. When it broke free, it sailed down the block, white and quick and stupidly alive, and North, unpracticed, young in this one foolish way, ran. The twine burned out of Lina's hand. She shouted, and the sound hit the snow and shattered into softer sounds that did not slow anything. North chased the bag as if it were the last sentence of a story he had to finish. Lina's boots were too heavy and her breath a desperate metronome. She cut through yards, hopped a fence that bit her knee, slid once and caught herself on the stoop of a stranger. Her chest felt full of needles. North, she yelled, voice cracking on the name as if it were ice. The city narrowed around her to the shapes her fear could hold. She found him by the river because fear is also a compass. The footbridge creaked under her weight, a wooden yes, no in each plank. Below, the bank wore a skin of ice glittering with wrongness. North stood with one paw lifted, panting, the bag finally caught on a bare branch and flapping like a flag of surrender. He looked up at Lina and then back at the water, which had opened a black mouth and was chewing the world slowly from the edges inward. "Don't," she said, the word insufficient against the physics of panic. He shifted. Uncertain. One more step would be the step that tells a story in past tense. "Don't move," another voice said, podgy with age and authority. Not angry, commander, calm. An old man in a knit cap stood at the other end of the bridge holding a coil of rope like a promise. He had fisherman's hands, thick and mapped with tiny cuts that suggested he understood both knots and patience. "Your dog?" he asked, already knowing the answer. "Our dog," Lina said, and felt the word surprise her, felt it stick. He nodded once, like that word had been the correct one. "You have to make the right kind of stillness," he told her. "That's the only thing that brings a creature back from the edge. Not pulling, not shouting, a living stillness." Lina knelt on the bridge, palms flat on the rail. She made her breath slow, as if she were blowing up a balloon she didn't want to pop. She thought of that first night in the kitchen, of her hand on North's sleeping flank. The stranger tied the rope to the rail with a bowline that looked like it had saved things before. He passed the other end into her hands. The hemp felt old and honest. "Put it on yourself," he said. "Not him, you're the anchor." The bank's angle was treacherous, but it had a logic. She went down on her backside, boots digging into the snow to make steps where there were none. The rope held steady, a line between survival and what the river wanted. "North," she murmured, tasting the name like a prayer. He stared at her, a creature with a history closing around him like teeth. The bag flapped and the wind agreed with it, and he trembled. "Hey," she said, pressing warmth into vowels. "Hey, look at me." She made her hand a cup, the same cup she had offered in the alley, a thing small and generous as heat. The water shifted, a black fish turning on its side. North's paw came down, not onto the ice, but back into his own print in the snow, and then the next, and the rope on Lina's waist took her weight as she eased them both away from the edge. The old man paid out rope gently, as if he were letting a story unwind at the right speed. When she reached him, he held out a mitten and she took it, and in that moment her heart stopped being a bird in a box. Later, when her mother's hands shook as she held a mug of tea and scolded them both, the dog with his ears pinned and his guilt enormous, the girl with her river-soaked pants and her fear turned inside out, Lina couldn't decide whether the shaking came from anger or relief. Maybe both. The old man had followed them home to be sure they made it. He drank tea that tasted like boiled wool and didn't complain. "Some creatures try to leave the past by running," he said, scratching North's chest with 2 fingers in a way that made the dog's eyes close halfway. "Some try to chew it out of the air. Some need to be shown that staying is not a trap." That night, when the power went out and their apartment was lit by the small yellow moons of candles in jars, North lay with his head on Lina's shoelace. The twine mark at his neck had started to fade, not erased but no longer screaming. The rope burn on Lina's palm stung when she forgot and touched hot ceramic. She liked the sting, liked that her body kept a record. She thought of the word adoption the way you think of a country you have never visited but carry in your pocket. Her mother stared at the documents the vet had given them and sighed in a way that knocked dust off decisions she had been keeping on the highest shelf. "We will need to talk to the landlord," she said. "We will need to be the kind of people who ask for forgiveness while bringing cookies." The landlord came 2 days later. He stood in their doorway and watched North sit and offer his paw unprompted, which he had learned not from training but from becoming brave enough to guess what kindness wanted. The landlord bent to take the paw, and his laugh, the quick, real kind, escaped like a bird that didn't know it had been in a cage. "Just don't let him ruin the floor," he said, which was a way of saying yes. Paperwork made its own small ceremony. The pen's scratch was a hymn. Lina's mother's signature looked like a bridge, and Lina loved it for that. North's name went on a tag, and when they threaded the collar through it, the click it made was a sound with a future in it. The twine. Lina couldn't throw it away. She coiled it and tied one gentle knot and put it in a drawer, because some artifacts should be kept not to worship the hurt, but to measure the distance traveled. North learned new words: stay, which he took as a promise; home, which he understood more quickly than Lina expected; and okay, which meant the world wasn't ending even if it had tried to. He learned the scratched path in the park, where snow packed down enough for running. He learned the corner where Mrs. Habibi always dropped biscuit crumbs from her pocket, by accident. He learned that when Lina laughed and fell backward on the hallway runner, he could lie down with his chin on her stomach, and the drum inside her would loud, soft beneath his jaw until both their breathing agreed. He learned that thunder was a neighbor moving furniture upstairs, and that the vacuum was a dragon with a short attention span. He learned that Lina sang off key on purpose to make him cock his head. Lina learned things too. She learned the smell of wet dog, which had more library in it than she would have guessed, paper and wool and outside. She learned that she could get up early to walk him, and the city looked different before it had put on its face, delivery trucks blinking, the sky not yet sure what color it had chosen for the day. She learned what love felt like when it arrived as responsibility, instead of a joke buoyant enough to float. She learned that the rhythm of feeding, walking, tending placed rails on days that might otherwise drift. Spring came as a rumor first. Water running under ice where you couldn't see it, a softness at the edges of cold talking in the pipes. Then it came as a fact. Snow retreated from the curb and left behind its winter's worth of secrets pennies, a glove without its twin, a crushed maple leaf that looked like a fossil of fire. North trotted through puddles with a dainty indignation that made Lina laugh. Trees did their slow, dumb magic. The world remembered green on a Tuesday. North did an unremarkable thing that felt like a sermon. He walked into the kitchen when Lina's mother dropped a pan and did not flinch, did not startle, did not run. He looked at the pan the way you look at a history that is done, and then he brought his rope toy to Lina as if to say, I choose this instead. They had one scare, a small one, a cough that went on too long, a vet visit where the scale finally read a number that belonged to a creature with a future. In the waiting room, a boy held a cat like a secret, and a woman read her phone with the face of someone arguing silently with the universe. North pressed his head into Lina's knee, and she rubbed the fur between his eyes in a way that made him sigh from his bones. The vet smiled with all her teeth. He's fine, she said. He loves you. That's a medicine we can't prescribe, but we recognize the effect. Outside, rain stitched the air into visible lines, and Lina tilted her face up and let it sew her in. If anyone asked, later, for one image to hold the whole of it, Lina would pick a small one. Not the river, not the paperwork, not even the first touch in the alley. She would pick a morning when she woke before the alarm and sat on the edge of her bed, and North, without lifting his head, thumped his tail twice against the floor. Then he stood, stretched, back end first, a bow to the day, and came to rest his chin on her knee. The window had a smudge on it that caught the sun and made the light go painterly on his fur, gold and warm where it had been thin and dull months ago. Her mother coughed softly in the next room. A bus sighed on the street. The city had laid down its noise like a soft rug. Lina put her hand on North's head and felt the exact weight of him, no more and no less, and she thought we belonged to one another, not like anchors but like horizons. The twine lives in the drawer still. Sometimes Lina takes it out and closes her eyes and touches it to remember how gentle can be a blade that cuts the right rope. The old man from the bridge brings her coffee in the park, sometimes, and tells her about the fish that got away, because he liked the story more than the meal. He calls North officer as a joke, and North tolerates it graciously. Mr. Singh from 2B, who once tucked his complaint back into his pocket like a scolded bird, now keeps dog biscuits that he claims are for visiting relatives, though no visiting relatives ever come by, only North. There is no moment where the story sings a loud ending. It closes the way good things do, with repetition. A rope toy offered, a shoe untied, and then tied again, a tag that clinks, dinner dishes stacked and drying on the rack, a dog who once flinched and now does not. When Lina turns off the light at night, the hallway holds a small moon of glow from the plug, in the landlord finally allowed after the outage. And North's shadow makes a mountain on the rug. She lies in bed and presses her palms together and feels the impressed memory of a rope that held and a twine that failed, and all the hands that chose otherwise. In the middle of the city a girl and a dog sleep. If you were to put your ear to her chest you would hear the spring there, water moving under something that has thawed. Slow and certain, a season that will not be stopped. On the first day that the park's grass remembers how to be green, Lina sits on a bench with a paperback snapped open on her knee. North watches a child fly a kite shaped like a swallow and doesn't chase. He just watches, as if wonder were enough. A breeze moves through and turns the pages of Lina's book for her. She lets it. She puts her hand out and North places his paw in it, and neither of them is surprised by this arrangement. The sky is a blue that refuses to be bragged about. The city's noises come washed and softer, like blankets on a line. A stranger passing says, "Good dog," and Lina says, "Yes," simply, without apology. The way you say your own name when asked. And if something in you wants an ending that flares, that shouts and bows and asks to be applauded, you will miss the miracle entirely. It is in the quiet way the day fits them, in the tender arithmetic of ordinary time. It is in the soft slick of North's nose nudging Lina's palm just once more before he settles, and in the last light catching on his tag so that his name becomes a star small enough to carry home.